It was a regular Tuesday night, me on the couch, TV blaring some forgettable sitcom, and my wife Lauren off doing whatever it is she does when she says she's getting some air. The baby was finally asleep after what felt like an eternity of lullabies, and I was savoring a moment of peace. That's when I made the fatal mistake. I decided to check Facebook. Now, before you judge, I wasn't snooping. Lauren had left her account logged in on my laptop. Honestly, I was about to log her out when I noticed a message notification. Harmless curiosity, right? Wrong. The message wasn't from her mom, her best friend, or anyone I recognized. Nope, it was from her cousin, Caleb. And it wasn't the kind of message you'd expect between family members. I'd like to see you on your knees. What the hell? At first, I thought it was some sick joke or maybe a weird autocorrect mishap, but no, my brain had to connect the dots faster than I could slam the laptop shut. It wasn't just one message. There were dozens, hundreds even. Scrolling through, I felt like I was flipping through the pages of a twisted romance novel I never wanted to read. Caleb. You remember that time in the cabin? Lauren. We were just kids, Caleb. Stop it. Caleb. Doesn't mean I don't still think about it. Excuse me? Just kids didn't cut it when you're two grown adults having this conversation in real time. My heart sank, then it boiled. My hands were shaking as I clicked through the rest of their messages. It wasn't just flirty nonsense. It was a full-blown script for a daytime soap opera, minus the cheesy music. Caleb, my wife's cousin, wasn't just testing boundaries or being a little inappropriate. This was next level. And Lauren? She wasn't exactly shutting it down. Sure, there were the obligatory "I'm married now" messages, but they reeked of obligation, not conviction. She might as well have added, "But keep trying, big boy." I slammed the laptop shut and sat there, staring at the blank screen like it might suddenly spit out an explanation. I needed answers. More importantly, I needed her to stop whatever the hell this was. So, naturally, I waited. Because, confronting your wife over family incident vibes while she's out getting air doesn't exactly scream good timing. When she finally walked in, carrying that same carefree attitude she always did, I tried to play it cool. "Hey, babe," I said, forcing a smile. "How was your walk?" "Good," she said, grabbing a water bottle from the fridge. "Why?" "No reason. Except for the fact that your cousin wants to reenact a scene from 50 Shades of Gross." I didn't say it. Instead, I nodded, clenched my fists, and decided to gather more evidence before blowing this thing wide open. If there's one thing I've learned from every crime show ever, it's that you need receipts. The next day, while Lauren was at work, I took the opportunity to dig deeper. Yeah, I know. It's not exactly the moral high ground. But when your wife is potentially playing Romeo and Juliet with her cousin, the moral high ground feels overrated. I opened her laptop again. This time, I went beyond the messages and dove into her email. It didn't take long to find more damning evidence. Emails with subject lines like "Yummy," seriously, and "Our little secret" filled her inbox. One particularly disturbing gem included a picture of Caleb, shirtless, with what I'll politely call evidence on his face. My stomach churned. Then I saw another email titled, "I still have our old friend." I clicked it, half regretting my decision already. Inside was a photo of how do I put this delicately, a certain kind of toy that no one in their right mind should refer to as an old friend. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some weird cousinly joke. This was betrayal, plain and simple. And I had all the proof I needed. When Lauren came home that evening, I didn't wait for our son to go to bed. I confronted her the second she walked through the door. "Lauren," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak, "we need to talk." She froze, her hand still on the doorknob. "Okay. About what?" I didn't waste time beating around the bush. "About Caleb, and what the hell is going on between you two?" Her face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" I opened the laptop and spun it around so she could see. The messages, the emails, the photos. Her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought she might faint. Then the tears came, big, ugly, crocodile tears. "It's not what you think," she sobbed, clutching her chest like she was the victim here. "I didn't do anything. He's the one who keeps texting me like that. I didn't know how to tell you." "Oh, you didn't know how to tell me?" I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "So instead you just kept going along with it? Kept sending him photos? Kept calling that thing your old friend? Please enlighten me, Lauren, because I'd love to hear the logic behind this one." She broke down into hysterics, muttering something about childhood trauma and how Caleb had always been a little off. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think this was all some twisted misunderstanding. But the receipts said otherwise. He's just always been like this," Lauren stammered between sobs. "He crosses lines, but I didn't want to make it worse by telling you." "Worse?" I said, my voice rising. "Lauren, you've been entertaining his line crossing for months. Hell, years. And you're worried about making it worse?" She flinched, her tears flowing even harder. "You don't understand. He's family. If I'd told you, it would have blown everything up. Holidays, birthdays, everything. I thought I could handle it." "Yeah, looks like you handled it just fine," I snapped, gesturing toward the laptop. "What part of this screams handling it to you?" She had no answer, just more tears and muttering about keeping the peace. I wasn't buying it. This wasn't about peace. It was about secrets. Dirty, messy, family-breaking secrets. I leaned back against the counter, trying to calm the storm in my head. "You need to fix this," I said finally. "You need to tell him it's over. Completely. No more messages, no more photos, no more whatever the hell this is." "I will," she whispered, barely audible. "I promise." But promises didn't mean much right now. I needed action. And I needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. A few days later, as I was trying to bury myself in work and pretend my life wasn't a dumpster fire, there was a knock at the door. It was Caleb. Yep. He had the audacity to show up at my house. My first instinct was to slam the door in his face, or maybe slam his face in the door, but curiosity, or stupidity, got the better of me. "What do you want?" I said, my voice colder than January in Alaska. He gave me this smarmy grin like we were old pals. "Just thought we should talk man to man." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. No way was this conversation happening within earshot of my kid. Talk about what? About how you've been sending my wife disgusting messages? Or about how you're the most confused family member in the history of ever? The grin disappeared. "Look, it's not what you think." "Oh, it's exactly what I think," I shot back. "And if you're here to explain yourself, save it. I've read the messages. I've seen the photos. There's no talking your way out of this." For a moment he looked genuinely panicked. Good. Then he pulled out the classic defense. Denial. "Lauren's been blowing this out of proportion. I was just joking around." "Joking?" I interrupted, my fists clenching. "You're telling me all this?" I pointed toward the house where my shattered marriage lived. "Was just a joke?" He hesitated, realizing how ridiculous he sounded. "Okay, maybe I went too far. But you've got to believe me. Nothing actually happened." I didn't believe him. Not for a second. But the last thing I needed was a public brawl on my front porch. So I took a deep breath and said, "Stay away from my wife. Stay away from my family. If I see you again, it won't end with a conversation." He got the message. At least I thought he did. He muttered some half-assed apology and walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, I confronted Lauren again. "Caleb came by today," I said, watching her reaction closely. Her eyes widened in panic. "What? Why?" "Your guess is as good as mine," I said. "He tried to tell me it was all a big misunderstanding. Care to weigh in on that?" She fidgeted, avoiding my gaze. I didn't know he'd do that." "That's not an answer," I pressed. "What aren't you telling me, Lauren?" She broke then, collapsing onto the couch with a fresh wave of tears. "It's not just him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean it's not just him?" I felt my stomach drop. "There were other times," she admitted, covering her face with her hands. Before we got married, I thought it was in the past. I thought I could move on. I stared at her, the weight of her words crushing what little hope I had left. So this has been going on for years? And you married me anyway? I love you, she said, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. I do. But Caleb, he's always been... Don't, I cut her off, my voice sharp. Don't try to explain this like it's normal, like it's okay, because it's not. She nodded, defeated. I'll cut him off, completely. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. But could it be fixed? I wasn't so sure anymore. Cutting Caleb off completely sounded like a good start, but let's be real. Actions speak louder than words. And Lauren? She was full of words, promises, apologies, excuses. I wanted to believe her, but something in my gut told me I wasn't getting the whole story. The tension in the house was suffocating. Every time she'd glance at her phone, my blood would boil. Was it him? Was she hiding more? I knew I couldn't live like this, playing detective in my own marriage, waiting for the other shoe to drop. So, naturally, I did the one thing I promised myself I wouldn't do again. I snooped. This time, I didn't bother with her laptop. I went straight for her phone. It was late, maybe 2 a.m., and Lauren was sound asleep. Her phone was charging on the nightstand, right next to the photo of us on our wedding day. A photo that now felt more like a cruel joke than a happy memory. I hesitated for a second. If I found nothing, I'd feel like a paranoid idiot. But if I found something, well, I'd finally have my answer. The lock screen didn't give me much, but when I scrolled through her texts, I hit the jackpot. Or, more accurately, the landmine. There it was, a message from Caleb, time-stamped from earlier that evening. Caleb, I miss you. Just say the word and I'll be there. And her response, Lauren, you know I can't. It's too risky now. He's suspicious. I stared at the screen, the words blurring as rage took over. Too risky now? Like this was some sort of game and I just stumbled onto their playbook? My hands trembled as I scrolled further, finding more of the same, late-night messages, thinly veiled flirtations, and her attempts to keep him at arm's length while still leaving the door cracked open. That was it. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I woke her up. Lauren, I said, my voice ice-cold. Explain this. I held up her phone, the screen still glowing with Caleb's latest declaration of love. Her eyes snapped open, and for a split second, I saw something in her expression. Panic? Guilt? Fear? It didn't matter. What are you doing with my phone? She asked, her voice shaky. Wrong question, I shot back. The real question is, what are you doing with him? Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. She sat up, rubbing her face like she was trying to erase the situation. It's not what it looks like. I laughed bitterly. You know, if I had $1 for every time someone said that in a bad movie, I'd be retired by now. So go ahead, Lauren. Tell me what it actually is. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. It's complicated. Complicated, I repeated, my voice rising. You're texting your cousin, after everything, telling him it's too risky now. Risky, Lauren? Risky? She started crying, again. At this point, it felt like her go-to defense. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she sobbed. I've been trying to end it. I have, but he doesn't listen. I shook my head, my anger boiling over. Don't you dare pin this on him. You let this happen. You encouraged it, and now you're trying to play the victim? Her tears turned to anger in an instant. You don't know what it's like, she snapped. He's family. I've been dealing with this my whole life. I didn't know how to stop it without ruining everything. Guess what? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Everything's already ruined. She didn't argue. She just sat there, staring at the floor, as if she'd finally run out of lies to tell. The next morning I packed a bag. I couldn't stay in that house another second, not with her, not with the lies, and definitely not with the ghost of Caleb hanging over us. I kissed our son goodbye, promising I'd see him soon, and walked out the door. Before I left, I did one last thing. I messaged Caleb. Not to threaten him, not to start a fight, though trust me, I wanted to, but to make one thing crystal clear. If I ever see you near my family again, I won't be responsible for what happens next. He read it instantly but didn't reply. Coward. I checked into a hotel that night, staring at the ceiling as the weight of everything finally hit me. My marriage was over. My trust in Lauren was shattered. And my life? It felt like it had been flipped upside down and set on fire. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I wasn't just going to walk away from this. No, Caleb and Lauren weren't getting off that easy. If they wanted to treat our lives like their personal soap opera, then it was time for the season finale, and I was writing the script. Step 1. Contact Caleb's wife, Stephanie. If anyone deserved to know the truth, it was her. And step 2? Make damn sure the rest of the family found out exactly what their golden boy and perfect daughter were up to. I found Stephanie's number faster than I expected. Thank you, family group chats. My heart was racing as I hit call. I didn't know how she'd react. Would she hang up? Would she think I was lying? Only one way to find out. Hello? Her voice was calm, almost too calm, like she hadn't yet guessed the nuclear bomb I was about to drop on her life. Stephanie? It's Eric. I paused, trying to figure out how to phrase the next part delicately. Screw delicacy. We need to talk. It's about Caleb. There was a beat of silence. Then she sighed. What about him? Her tone caught me off guard, resigned, almost like she was expecting bad news. It's complicated, I started, but then decided there was no point in sugarcoating it. He's been having an affair with Lauren. The silence this time was longer. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp and cold. What did you just say? You heard me, I said. I have proof, texts, emails, photos. I didn't want to believe it either, but there's no denying it. Caleb and Lauren have been involved. Stephanie didn't yell. She didn't cry. Instead, she let out a bitter laugh that sent chills down my spine. Of course, she said, almost to herself. Of course he is. Wait, you're not surprised? I asked, stunned. I'm disgusted, she snapped. But surprised? No, Caleb's always had, let's just say, issues with boundaries. I thought I married someone who'd grown up, but clearly I was wrong. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I felt bad for her. Then I remembered why I'd called. Listen, Stephanie, I'm not just telling you this to ruin your day. I think the whole family needs to know what's been going on. She didn't hesitate. You're damn right they do. Stephanie and I coordinated our plan like seasoned generals preparing for war. She'd gather Caleb's parents, siblings, and a few other close relatives. I'd handle my side of the family, making sure Lauren had no idea what was coming. The meeting was set for the following weekend at Caleb's parents' house. A bold choice, but hey, if you're going to burn bridges, might as well do it on their turf. When the day arrived, I felt like I was walking into a lion's den. The room was packed with family members, all blissfully unaware of the bombshell about to be dropped. Caleb looked smug as ever, probably assuming this was some routine family get-together. Lauren wasn't there, thank God, but I knew her absence wouldn't save her from the fallout. Stephanie stood up first. Thank you all for coming, she said, her voice steady but ice-cold. We need to talk about Caleb. You could have heard a pin drop. Caleb shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confident smirk starting to crack. I found out recently that Caleb has been unfaithful, Stephanie continued, her eyes scanning the room. And not just with anyone, with Lauren. The gasps were audible, followed by murmurs and exchanged glances. Caleb shot to his feet. Stephanie, what the hell are you? Sit down, she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. You don't get to talk right now. That's when I stepped in, pulling out the printed messages and photos I'd brought as evidence. In case anyone needs proof, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Here's a little scrapbook of Caleb and Lauren's greatest hits. The room exploded. Caleb's parents turned pale. His siblings started shouting. and Caleb himself looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. For the first time, he had no clever comeback, no smug retort, just silence. By the time the meeting ended, Caleb was effectively disowned. His parents told him to pack his things and leave their house. Stephanie announced she'd be filing for divorce first thing Monday morning. And as for the rest of the family, let's just say Thanksgiving was going to be very awkward this year. I walked out of that house feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. I'd exposed the truth, punished Caleb, and ensured that Lauren's betrayal wouldn't stay hidden. But at what cost? My marriage was still over. My son would still grow up in a broken home, and no amount of revenge could change that. As I got into my car, Stephanie called out to me. "Eric," she said, her voice softer now. "Thank you for telling me." I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything. She didn't need to thank me. I hadn't done it for her. I'd done it for myself, to regain some shred of control over a life that had spun completely out of it. When I told Lauren I wanted a divorce, I expected fireworks, screaming, crying, maybe a thrown vase or two. What I didn't expect was the begging. "Eric, please," she said, clutching my arm like it was the only thing holding her to reality. "We can fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll block Caleb. I'll do anything. Just don't give up on us." Her tears were relentless, soaking into my shirt as I stood there, unmoved. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to think there was a version of this story where we could salvage something. But every time I even considered it, the images of her messages with Caleb came flooding back. The lies, the betrayal. It was too much. "It's over, Lauren," I said firmly, pulling my arm away. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." Her sobs turned into desperate wails, and I left her there, crumpled on the floor. I put the divorce papers on the table. It wasn't easy, walking away like that. But I knew if I stayed, I'd let her manipulate me again. I had to be strong, for myself, and for our son. Then I got a call from Lauren's parents. It must have taken them a long time to get over the shock of the news. It was her father, Richard Still. I wasn't expecting his tone. Firm, direct, and with just a hint of exhaustion. "Eric, we need to talk," he said. "Come by the house this evening. Susan and I have some things we want to discuss." When I arrived, Richard and Susan were waiting in the living room, their faces drawn with the weight of what they'd learned. There was no small talk, no pleasantries. Richard got straight to the point. "We're sorry for what you've been put through," he said, his voice steady but grim. "Lauren's actions, they're inexcusable. We want you to know that we stand with you in whatever decision you make." Susan nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "This isn't the daughter we raised," she said quietly. "We can't imagine how hurt you must feel, but please know that we're here for you and for your son." It was a strange sensation hearing this from them. On one hand, I appreciated their support. On the other, it felt surreal to see the cracks in the picture-perfect family Lauren always portrayed. But there was one question I needed answered before I could move forward. "What happens now?" I asked. "With Lauren? With Caleb? With everything?" Richard's jaw tightened. "Lauren has already been told, in no uncertain terms, that she will stay away from Caleb, permanently. If she doesn't—" He paused, exchanging a glance with Susan before continuing. "She risks losing custody of her son. We will support you in whatever steps you need to take to ensure that happens." I raised an eyebrow, surprised at his candor. "You'd really do that?" Susan's voice was soft but resolute. "She's our daughter, Eric, but what she's done is unforgivable. We won't stand by and let her drag our grandson into this mess. If she refuses to cut ties with Caleb, then yes, we'll stand with you to protect that boy." I let their words sink in, a mix of relief and bitterness swirling in my chest. Relief that I wasn't alone in this fight. Bitterness that it had come to this at all. Richard leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Let me make one thing clear, Eric. If she ever so much as contacts Caleb again, she'll lose everything, and she knows it." "Thank you," I said finally, my voice thick with emotion. "I just want to do what's best for my son." Richard nodded. "So do we. and that means holding Lauren accountable. The next morning, Lauren showed up at my hotel. She looked tired, defeated, like someone who'd been fighting a losing battle for far too long. "I'll sign the papers," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. I don't want to lose my son." Her words should have given me some sense of satisfaction, but they didn't. Instead, I just felt empty. This was the woman I'd loved, the mother of my child, and now she was a stranger, someone I couldn't even look at without feeling betrayed. "You won't lose him," I said, though my tone was colder than I intended. "As long as you stay away from Caleb and focus on being a decent mother, you'll have shared custody. But if you screw this up, Lauren, I won't hesitate to fight for sole custody." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The divorce process moved faster than I expected. Lauren's parents made sure of that. Within a few months, the papers were signed, the custody agreement was finalized, and Lauren moved out of the house. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of her betrayal, while still heavy, no longer suffocated me. I had a chance to rebuild my life, and I wasn't going to waste it. As for Lauren, from what I've heard, she's been keeping her distance from Caleb. Whether that's out of guilt, fear, or her father's threats, I don't know. And honestly, I don't care. My only focus now is on my son, and on making sure he grows up in a home where he never has to question the loyalty or love of the people around him. Months after the dust had seemingly settled, I was finally starting to rebuild my life. I felt like I was back in control, that is, until Caleb decided to reappear. It started with a knock at my door. No, not a knock. A pounding, loud enough to shake the frame. When I opened the door, there he was, looking like a storm ready to break. "You ruined my life, Eric," he shouted, his face twisted with anger. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I stared at him, half in disbelief, half in annoyance. "What are you talking about, Caleb?" "You know damn well," he spat, jabbing a finger at me. "I'm a pariah. My parents disowned me. I've been cut out of the will, and the whole family treats me like some kind of monster. All because of you." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "No, Caleb, this isn't because of me. This is because of you. You're the one who couldn't keep boundaries straight. You made those choices, not me. You think you're so righteous, don't you?" His voice was rising, his composure cracking. "You think you're better than me?" "I don't think," I said evenly. "I know, because I didn't destroy 2 marriages and my own family for my selfish, twisted desires." And that's when he snapped. Caleb lunged at me, his fists swinging wildly. Fortunately, I was ready. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the pepper spray I'd been carrying since everything went down, and gave him a face full of it. He stumbled back, clutching his eyes and screaming, "You son of a—" "Save it for the cops," I said, already dialing 911. When the officers arrived, Caleb was still sitting on the curb, rubbing his eyes and muttering threats under his breath. I calmly gave my statement, showed them the footage from my doorbell camera, and watched as they cuffed him and loaded him into the back of the squad car. Caleb ended up serving a short sentence for attempted assault, but the real punishment was the total collapse of his life. His parents didn't just disown him, they made sure everyone in the extended family knew exactly why. Even the few relatives who had defended him initially turned their backs after his outburst. Lauren's family rallied around me in the days that followed. Richard called to thank me for handling the situation with restraint, while Susan sent over a casserole with a heartfelt note that read, "We're so sorry for everything you've been through." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. The weight of everything that had happened still lingered, but now I had people in my corner who genuinely wanted to help me move forward. As for Caleb, he had plenty of time to reflect on his choices behind bars, with no family, no inheritance, and no support left to lean on. His life had unraveled completely, and for once, I didn't feel the slightest bit guilty about it. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck.